Hey, thanks for clicking on this video. If you're into stories that'll mess with your head for days, hit that like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what you're doing right now. Working? Commuting? Let me know. Alright, here's what you need to know. I found out I'm not human. Well, not entirely. And the things hunting me? They're worse than anything you've read about in scripture. Let's get into it. I woke up drowning, not in water, in sound. A frequency so deep it bypassed my ears entirely and vibrated straight into my bones. My bedroom in Portland felt like the inside of a bell that had just been struck by something massive and invisible. The clock read 3:47 a.m. My sheets were soaked through, but not with sweat. The fabric was cold, almost frozen, and when I pulled my hand away, frost crystals crumbled from my fingertips. November in Oregon gets chilly, sure, but my apartment was heated. The thermostat on the wall read 72 degrees. I stumbled to the bathroom, flipped the light switch. Nothing happened. The bulb had blown, or something had killed it. In the ambient glow from the street lamp outside, I caught my reflection in the mirror. That's when I saw them. Marks, patterns, burned into my left shoulder and trailing down my ribs like someone had traced them with a branding iron heated to white. But there was no pain. Just the faint smell of ozone, like after a lightning strike. The designs were geometric, impossibly precise, interlocking circles and angles that seemed to shift when I wasn't looking directly at them. I touched one. The skin was smooth, healed, as if the marks had been there for years, but they hadn't been there yesterday. I spent the next hour searching online. Scarification, ritual markings, spontaneous dermatological phenomena. Nothing matched. The designs looked ancient, pre-Christian, maybe older. One forum suggested stigmata. Another claimed demonic possession. I closed my laptop before I spiraled further. Work was a blur. I manage inventory for a medical supply company. Nothing glamorous, just scanning barcodes and updating spreadsheets in a warehouse near the industrial district. My co-worker Travis noticed I was off. "You look like hell, Dominic," he said, leaning against my desk with his coffee. "Rough night?" "Something like that. You should take a day. Seriously, you're pale as a corpse." I wanted to tell him about the marks, the cold, the sound that had yanked me from sleep like a fishhook through the skull. But how do you explain something you don't understand? Instead, I nodded and kept working. By lunch, the marks had started itching. Not on the surface. Deeper, like something under my skin was trying to claw its way out. I locked myself in the bathroom and pulled up my shirt. The patterns were glowing faintly, pulsing in rhythm with my heartbeat. I left work early, told Travis I had food poisoning. He didn't argue. The clinic on Burnside was one of those walk-in places that doesn't ask too many questions. The doctor, a tired woman in her 50s, examined the marks with a furrowed brow. "How long have you had these?" "I don't know. They appeared last night." She frowned. "That's not possible. That's not... These are healed scars, old ones. I'm telling you, they weren't there yesterday." She stepped back, her expression shifting from clinical to uneasy. "I'm going to refer you to a dermatologist, maybe a neurologist. This is beyond my scope." I never made those appointments. That night, he found me. I was walking home from the convenience store, carrying a bag of frozen dinners and cheap beer, when I felt it. That sensation of being watched, except amplified. Not just eyes on me. Attention. The kind that presses down on your chest and makes your peripheral vision blur. The street was empty. Streetlights flickered in sequence as I passed beneath them, each one dying with a faint pop. My breath misted in front of me, visible now despite the mild temperature. Then I heard the voice. "Kelvin." I stopped. The word was unfamiliar, but something in my gut recognized it, like hearing your name shouted in a crowded room, except the room was my own skull. "Who's there?" My voice cracked. A figure stepped out from the alley ahead, tall, gaunt, dressed in a long coat that looked decades out of style. His face was sharp, angular, too symmetrical to be natural. His eyes caught the light wrong, reflecting it back like an animal's. "You shouldn't be here," he said. His accent was indistinct, shifting between something European and something else entirely. "They know where you are now." "Who are you?" "Someone trying to keep you alive." He stepped closer, and I saw his hands, scarred, burned, marked with designs similar to mine. "The seal on your skin is waking up. That means they've started moving." "I don't know what you're talking about." "You will." He turned to leave, and that's when I felt it, a shift in the air pressure, like the moment before a thunderstorm breaks. The temperature plummeted. My breath came out in thick clouds. The streetlight above us shattered, raining glass onto the pavement. Something was coming. I heard it before I saw it. A wet, scraping sound, like meat dragged across concrete. From the mouth of the alley a shape emerged, too large, too wrong. Its limbs bent in places they shouldn't, and its head lolled at an angle that would have snapped a human neck. It had no eyes, just smooth skin where they should have been. But I knew it was looking at me. The stranger moved between us, his posture shifting into something combat-ready. "Run! What the hell is that?" "Something that wants what's inside you. Run!" I ran. Behind me, I heard the sound of impact. Flesh against flesh. Something wet and heavy. The creature screamed, a noise that made my teeth ache and my vision swim. I didn't look back. I made it 3 blocks before I realized the marks on my shoulder were burning. Not metaphorically. Actually burning. Heat radiated through my jacket, and when I pressed my hand against it, I felt something beneath the skin, movement, like a second heartbeat. The alley ahead was a dead end. I spun around. The creature was there, closer than it should have been. Its mouth opened too wide, revealing rows of teeth that spiraled inward like a lamprey's. The smell hit me, rot and copper and something chemical. I raised my hands instinctively, a useless gesture. And then light exploded from my palms. Not light, something else. A force, concussive and blinding, that slammed into the creature and hurled it backward into the brick wall. The impact left a crater. The thing twitched once, then went still. I stared at my hands. They were unmarked, normal. But I could still feel the energy coursing beneath the skin, coiled and waiting. Footsteps behind me. The stranger appeared, breathing hard, blood on his coat. He looked at the creature, then at me. "You shouldn't have been able to do that." "I didn't mean to. Doesn't matter." "You did." He grabbed my arm, his grip like iron. "We need to move. Now." "Who are you?" "My name is Sariel." His eyes met mine, and for the first time, I saw something inhuman in them, a flicker of light that didn't come from the street lamps. "And you, Dominic Vale, are not what you think you are." The marks on my shoulder flared again, brighter this time. Sariel pulled me forward, and we disappeared into the night, leaving the dead thing behind. I should have asked more questions, should have demanded answers, fought back, called the police. But deep down, in a place I didn't know existed until that moment, I understood one thing clearly. My life as a human had just ended. We drove for 3 hours in silence. Sariel's car was a black sedan with tinted windows and no GPS, no phone charger, nothing that could be tracked. The leather seats smelled old, worn, like the vehicle had seen decades of use. He drove fast but carefully, taking exits at random, doubling back through neighborhoods I didn't recognize. I watched the city lights fade behind us as we headed east into the Cascade foothills. My hands hadn't stopped shaking since the alley. Every few minutes, I'd glance down at my palms, expecting to see something different. They looked normal, felt normal. But I remembered the sensation, the power erupting from somewhere deep inside my chest, traveling down my arms like liquid lightning. "Where are we going?" I finally asked. "Somewhere they can't follow easily." Sariel's eyes never left the road. "The wards are strongest in the wilderness. Fewer human souls to interfere with the frequencies." You're not making sense. I will, soon. He glanced at me briefly. How much do you remember about your childhood? The question caught me off guard. What does that have to do with anything? Everything. Answer it, I thought back. Foster care in Seattle until I was 8. Then adoption by a couple in Tacoma who treated me well enough but died in a car accident when I was 16. Back into the system until I aged out. Nothing unusual. Nothing that explained this. Normal childhood, rough patches, normal life. No. Serial's jaw tightened. Fabricated memories. Probably. They're good at that. Layering false experiences over real ones until you can't tell the difference. Do you remember being born? Nobody remembers being born. You would, if you'd experienced it the way you actually did. He pulled off the highway onto a dirt road that barely qualified as such. The trees pressed in on both sides, their branches forming a tunnel overhead. The headlights carved through darkness so complete it felt solid. After 20 minutes of bone-rattling driving, we arrived at a cabin. No lights, no power lines. Just a structure that looked like it had grown from the forest floor rather than been built on it. Inside, the air was warmer than it should have been. Candles ignited themselves as we entered, flames springing to life without anyone touching them. The walls were covered in symbols, some like the ones on my skin, others more complex, layered in patterns that hurt to look at directly. Sit, Serial said, gesturing to a chair near a table made from a single piece of oak. He opened a cabinet and pulled out a glass bottle filled with amber liquid. He poured 2 glasses, slid one toward me. I don't drink. You do now. Trust me. I took a sip. It burned going down but cleared my head somehow, sharpening my senses instead of dulling them. Sariel sat across from me, his coat falling open to reveal more scars, more marks. His entire torso was a canvas of symbols. You want to know what you are, he said. Not a question. Yes. You're a mistake. A beautiful, dangerous mistake. He took a long drink. Do you know what a Nephilim is? Giants, Bible stuff, mythology. History. The offspring of angels and humans. Most died in the flood. The rest were hunted down over millennia. But a few survived, and their bloodlines persisted, diluted but present. That's what you are, partly. My throat tightened. That's insane. The creature you killed tonight, did that seem sane to you? His eyes reflected the candlelight strangely. You're not just Nephilim. You're something rarer. Your mother was human. Your father was one of us, a guardian, protectors of thresholds between realms. And you, he leaned forward. You carry something that shouldn't exist in a mortal body, a fragment of primordial power, older than the angelic hierarchy. We call it a virtue shard. The marks on my shoulder throbbed as he spoke, as if responding to the words. Why me? Because someone believed you could handle it. Or because they were desperate. I don't know which. Sariel stood, walked to the wall, traced his fingers over one of the larger symbols. The gates of heaven aren't metaphorical. They're real, physical locations that shift across the planet based on celestial alignments. Right now, one of them is approximately 200 miles northeast of here, and it's being hunted. By what? By the Grigori, the Watchers who fell. They taught humanity forbidden knowledge millennia ago and were punished for it, imprisoned. But some escaped, and they've been building power ever since. They want back in, and they need someone like you to open the door. I stood abruptly, the chair scraping against wood. This is too much. I need proof. Real proof. Sariel's expression darkened. You want proof? He placed his hand on my forehead before I could react. The world inverted. I was somewhere else. Nowhere else. A space between spaces where geometry didn't work correctly, and light came from sources that didn't exist. I saw my birth, except it wasn't a hospital. It was a stone chamber lit by flames that burned without fuel. Figures in robes surrounded a woman screaming, and above her something descended, radiant, terrible, too bright to perceive directly. The thing touched her swollen belly and the light poured inward. The woman's screams changed pitch, became something between agony and ecstasy. When it was over, when the infant emerged, the marks were already there, glowing like fresh brands. The vision shattered. I was on the floor of the cabin, gasping, my nose bleeding. Sariel crouched beside me, his expression unreadable. "Now you know," he said quietly. Before I could respond, the windows exploded inward. Glass and wood splinters filled the air. 3 figures landed inside, impossibly graceful, their movements too fluid to be human. They wore no armor, just clothing that seemed woven from shadow and starlight. Their faces were beautiful and wrong, proportions slightly off, eyes too large, mouths that smiled too wide. "Found you," one said, his voice layered with harmonics that made my teeth ache. Sariel moved faster than I could track. His hand swept through the air, and light, true light, burning and absolute, blazed from his palm. The first attacker screamed, stumbling backward, but the other 2 split apart, flanking us. "The shard," the female said, her gaze locked on me. "Give it willingly, hybrid, and we'll make your death quick." "Run," Sariel commanded, not looking at me. "I don't know where." "Out, now." I ran. Behind me, the sounds of combat, impacts that shook the cabin's foundation. Light so bright it cast my shadow in multiple directions at once. Screams in languages I didn't recognize but somehow understood fragments of. Threats, promises of pain. The forest swallowed me. I ran blind, branches whipping my face, roots trying to trip me. The marks on my body weren't just glowing now, they were pulsing, creating a rhythm that synced with my heartbeat and seemed to guide me through the darkness. I burst into a clearing and nearly collided with someone. A woman, mid-30s, athletic build, dressed in tactical gear. She had the same marks on her exposed forearms, glowing faintly in the darkness. "You must be the package," she said, her accent vaguely Scandinavian. "I'm Petra. Come with me if you want answers that don't involve being captured and vivisected." "Who are you?" "Another Guardian." Sariel radioed ahead before they hit. "There's a safe house 3 miles north. Move." We moved. Petra ran like someone who'd spent her life in combat zones, and I struggled to keep up. She spoke between breaths, explaining in fragments. There were others like us. Not many, maybe 24 worldwide. We protected the gates, rotating positions, staying ahead of the Grigori factions that hunted us. "Sariel will be fine," she said when I asked. "He's one of the Archangel class. Those 3 are dead already." We reached the safe house just as dawn broke, a bunker built into a hillside, disguised as a collapsed mine entrance. Inside, it was larger than it should have been, the walls lined with weapons I recognized and others I didn't. Swords that hummed with low frequencies. Guns with barrels inscribed with symbols. Vials of liquid that glowed like captured starlight. 2 others were there. A man named Tobias, older, scarred, with eyes that had seen too much. And a younger guy, maybe 25, named Elias, whose nervous energy reminded me of myself. "So you're the key," Tobias said, looking me over like I was a puzzle he couldn't solve. "Hell of a thing to be. I don't want to be anything." "Too late. You already are." He gestured to the table where maps were spread out, covered in marks and annotations. "The gate's location shifts, but we've narrowed it down. It'll manifest fully in 72 hours. And when it does, every fallen entity within 1,000 miles will converge on it, including Azazel." "Who?" Petra answered. "The leader of the Grigori faction hunting you. One of the original Watchers. He's been imprisoned for 4,000 years in the Abyss, but his followers have been working to free him. Your shard is the final component they need." Elias leaned forward. "The shard can open locks that shouldn't be opened, including the seals on the gate. That's why you're not just valuable. You're a weapon." The weight of it settled over me like a burial shroud. I wasn't a person anymore. I was an object. A key. A tool in a war I'd never asked to be part of. "Can it be removed?" I asked. "The shard." Silence. Finally, Sariel's voice came from the entrance. "No, it's woven into your soul. Removing it would kill you, possibly destroy your entire essence." He was bloodied but alive, his coat shredded. He carried something wrapped in cloth, a weapon, long and angular. He set it on the table. "They know where we are now. We have maybe 6 hours before the next wave. We need to move to the gate location, fortify, and prepare for the convergence." He looked at me directly. "And you need to decide what you're willing to become." "I don't understand." "The shard responds to intent, to will. You can use it defensively as you did in the alley, or you can unlock its full potential, become something closer to what your father was. But there's a cost. Every time you draw on that power, you lose a piece of your humanity. Use it enough, and you'll stop being Dominic Vale entirely." Tobias spoke up. "We've all made that choice. Look at us. We're not fully human anymore. We're tools, just like you. The difference is, we chose it. You didn't." I looked around the room, at these people who'd been fighting a hidden war for decades, maybe centuries. Their scars weren't just physical. I could see it in their eyes, the emptiness, the distance. They'd sacrificed everything. "What happens if I refuse?" I asked. "If I just walk away?" Petra's expression softened. "They'll hunt you forever, and everyone you care about becomes collateral damage. There is no walking away." Outside, the wind picked up. Through the bunker's ventilation, I heard something distant, a sound like vast wings beating against the sky. The others heard it too. Their hands went to weapons instinctively. "They're early," Sariel said grimly. He looked at me. "Welcome to the war, Dominic. I hope you survive it." The lights flickered. Something massive struck the hillside above us, and the entire bunker shook. Dust rained from the ceiling. Alarms began blaring, silent alarms, frequencies I felt rather than heard. Tobias was already moving, grabbing weapons, distributing them. Elias looked terrified but ready. Petra checked her gear with practiced efficiency. And I stood there, marks burning beneath my skin, feeling the shard pulse with anticipation. Whatever was coming, it was here for me, and I had no idea if I was strong enough to face it. The bunker's reinforced door buckled inward like aluminum foil. Through the widening gap, I saw it. A hand, if you could call it that. Fingers too long, joints bending in impossible directions, skin that looked like polished obsidian threaded with veins of molten gold. The thing pushed, and the steel groaned, screaming like a living creature being tortured. "Secondary exit now!" Sariel shouted, already moving toward the back wall. His hand swept across a section that looked solid, and the stone simply dissolved, revealing a tunnel carved into the earth. The smell of minerals and ancient darkness rushed out. We ran. Petra went first, her weapon, a blade that hummed with the same frequency as my marks, held ready. The sound it made vibrated through my bones, making my teeth ache. Tobias pulled Elias along, the younger guardian's face pale with terror, his breathing ragged and panicked. I was last, with Sariel behind me, his presence a wall between us and whatever was tearing through the bunker. The tunnel was barely tall enough to stand in, lit by phosphorescent moss that pulsed in rhythm with my heartbeat. The air was thick, damp, tasting of copper and earth. Behind us, the sounds of destruction, metal screaming, stone shattering, and underneath it all, a voice speaking in syllables that made my skull ache. Each word felt like fingernails dragging across the inside of my brain. My lungs burned. The marks on my body weren't just glowing anymore. They were hot, almost feverish, as if my skin was trying to reject them. I stumbled, caught myself against the tunnel wall. The stone was warm, pulsing with a heartbeat that wasn't mine. "They sent a throne," Sariel said, his voice tight with something I'd never heard from him before: fear. An actual celestial enforcer. Azazel's people must have bargained something significant. Blood sacrifice, probably. Maybe an entire bloodline. I thought thrones were supposed to be good, I managed between breaths, my voice echoing strangely in the confined space. They're supposed to be obedient. Some remember the old hierarchies, before the division. To them, the Grigori aren't fallen. They're misunderstood revolutionaries, victims of divine tyranny. He glanced back, his eyes reflecting the moss light like an animal's. And some of them are just old enough to be insane. 4,000 years of single-minded purpose tends to break even celestial minds. The tunnel opened into a ravine, steep walls rising on both sides like the earth had been split by a giant's axe. A river cut through the bottom, water moving fast and dark, reflecting no light. The sky above was wrong, too dark for dawn, stars visible despite the approaching sunrise, and among them, shapes moving that were too large and too purposeful to be birds. They circled slowly, patient predators waiting for the right moment. I could smell ozone and something else, sulfur mixed with cinnamon, an impossible combination that made my stomach turn. The temperature had dropped 20 degrees in seconds. My breath came out in thick clouds. "How far to the gate?" Petra asked, wiping blood from a cut on her forehead. Her hands were steady despite everything, her military training evident in every efficient movement. Sariel checked something that looked like a compass but with symbols instead of directions, the needle spinning wildly before settling on a direction that felt wrong in my gut. 40 miles. We have a vehicle stashed 2 miles west. If we can reach it before... The cliff wall exploded above us. Rock and debris rained down in chunks the size of cars. The sound was deafening, a roar that drowned out thought. I threw my arms up instinctively, and the shard responded before my conscious mind could process what was happening. A barrier of light materialized, geometric patterns interlocking above our heads. The falling stone deflected around us, creating a circle of safety in the chaos. The effort left me dizzy, my vision swimming. Blood dripped from my nose, hot and metallic on my lips. My legs buckled, but Petra caught me, her grip iron strong. "Stay with us," she commanded, her accent thickening with stress. The throne descended slowly through the dust cloud, its true form barely contained within something approximating human shape. It stood 12 feet tall, its body a geometric impossibility of wings, eyes, and interlocking rings that rotated independently. Each ring was inscribed with names, thousands of them, maybe millions, in languages that predated writing itself. The wings weren't feathered, but crystalline, each facet reflecting realities that shouldn't exist simultaneously. When it spoke, every syllable felt like a physical impact, like being struck in the chest with a hammer made of sound. "Surrender the vessel. The shard must be contained. The abomination ends here." The word abomination hit me harder than the falling rocks had. That's what I was to them. Not a person, not even a mistake. An abomination that needed to be erased. "It's not a possession," Sariel shouted back, stepping forward to put himself between us and the throne. His voice carried authority I hadn't heard before, the weight of millennia, of battles fought before humanity learned to speak. He's a living being with rights under the covenant. "You know the law, Raziel. You helped write it." The throne's rings stopped spinning for a moment. Something like recognition flickered across its incomprehensible features. "The covenant is void. Heaven has rescinded protection for abominations. The new decree was issued 7 days ago. You were not informed because you were deemed compromised." Sariel's expression darkened. "Compromised. I've served for 4,000 years, and in that time, you have grown too attached to the mortals. The throne assembly has deemed this a liability. Surrender the vessel, or be judged alongside it." I felt something crack inside me, not physical, but deeper. A rage I didn't know I was capable of, pure and hot and focused. The shard reacted to my anger, surging with power that wanted release. My hands began to glow, light bleeding through my skin like I was being consumed from within. Elias grabbed my arm. "Don't. If you lose control now, you'll kill all of us." His fear was genuine, but so was his trust. He believed I could hold it back. I wasn't sure I believed it myself. Tobias and Petra opened fire, not with bullets, with concentrated light, beams that would have vaporized anything mortal. The weapons made a sound like the universe tearing, a shriek of fundamental forces being weaponized. The air itself ignited where the beams passed. The throne's wings simply absorbed the energy, its rings spinning faster, building up a response. The temperature around it dropped to freezing, then below. Ice crystals formed on the rocks, on our clothing, in our breath. When it released its counterattack, the ravine lit up like a solar flare. I didn't think. There was no time for thought, only instinct. I pushed forward with everything I had, and the shard erupted. The collision of forces created a shockwave that shattered the remaining cliff faces, sending tons of rock into the river. The water flash-boiled instantly, steam rising in thick columns that obscured everything. My ears were ringing. Blood ran from them, from my nose, from my eyes. Every nerve ending was on fire. But we were alive. When the light cleared and the steam began to dissipate, the throne was gone, not destroyed, but retreated. Even celestial enforcers had limits. Even they could be hurt. But Elias was down. He'd taken the edge of the blast. His left side burned black, symbols on his arm now darkened and lifeless. The smell was horrific, not burning flesh but something worse, like the scent of a soul being unmade. Petra was already beside him, her hands moving frantically, trying to channel healing energy. But I could see from her expression, from the way her hands trembled, that it was too late. The damage was too deep. It had burned through not just his body, but his essence. Elias looked up at me, his eyes focusing with difficulty. Blood, or something like it too bright to be human blood, leaked from the corner of his mouth. His breathing was shallow, wet, wrong. "Don't let them make you a monster." His hand found mine, squeezing weakly. His skin was cold already, the warmth draining away with terrifying speed. "Stay human. Promise me." "I promise," I said, my throat tight. "I promise." He smiled then. Just a little. Liar. "But thank you for trying." Then he was gone, just gone. His body didn't decay. It simply faded, becoming translucent like colored glass, then clear as water, then invisible until nothing remained but scorched earth and the smell of ozone. Even his blood disappeared, evaporating into nothing. I'd never seen someone die before. Not really. And this was worse than I'd imagined, because there was nothing left. No body to mourn, no grave to visit. Just absence where a person used to be. "That's what happens to us," Tobias said quietly, his voice heavy with old grief. "We don't get graves. We don't get funerals. We just stop existing, like we were never here at all." Petra stood slowly, her hands still shaking. She didn't cry. I don't think she had tears left after years of this. But her face was carved from stone, hard and cold and full of barely contained rage. "We need to move," Sariel said, not unkindly. "Mourn later. Survive now." It sounded callous, but I understood. This was their reality. Death was a constant companion, and stopping to grieve in the moment meant joining the dead. "Vehicle, now," Sariel continued. "The gate opens in 18 hours, and we need to be there first." We ran again, leaving Elias's absence behind. The vehicle was an armored SUV hidden under camouflage netting in an abandoned logging site. The netting itself was woven with symbols that bent light around it, making the vehicle nearly invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. We piled in, and Petra drove like she was being chased by the apocalypse, which, essentially, we were. The engine roared to life with a sound that felt too loud, too visible. Every instinct screamed that we were exposed, vulnerable. But Petra's hands were steady on the wheel, her jaw set with determination. The landscape shifted as we traveled northeast. Trees gave way to high desert, the air growing thinner and drier. Then came mountains that felt ancient in a way that had nothing to do with geology. These weren't just old rocks. They were places where reality had worn thin over millennia, where the boundary between worlds had been tested and stressed until it was gossamer thin. The air pressure changed noticeably, making my ears pop. Colors seemed more vivid, almost painfully bright, the blue of the sky too intense, the red of the rocks too deep. Sounds carried strangely, echoes arriving before the original noise. I realized we were approaching a thin place, where the barrier between realms wore down to almost nothing. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I gripped my knees, trying to steady myself. But the adrenaline had nowhere to go. Elias's face kept flashing in my mind, the way his eyes had looked up at me, still trusting even as he died. "Tell me about my father," I said to Serial during a brief moment of calm, needing something to focus on besides the crushing weight of guilt. He was quiet for a long time, staring out at the passing landscape. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than I'd ever heard it. His name was Azrael. Not the angel of death from human mythology, different entity, similar name, unfortunate coincidence. He was a threshold guardian, one of the best we'd ever had. 500 years of perfect service, never lost a gate, never failed a duty. Sariel's expression darkened, old pain surfacing. When he met your mother, he knew it was forbidden. Guardians don't form attachments to mortals. It compromises judgment, creates vulnerabilities. But he loved her anyway. Sophia was her name. She was a translator, specialized in dead languages. She'd stumbled onto references to the gates in ancient texts and was trying to piece together what they meant. I leaned forward, hungry for details. What was she like? Brilliant, stubborn. She had this laugh that could light up a room. He smiled briefly. Azrael never stood a chance. They had 2 years together before the Watchers found them. The ritual that created you, it wasn't his choice, wasn't hers. The Grigori captured them both, held them in a place outside normal space. They performed the binding, forced the shard into your unformed soul while you were still in the womb. My stomach turned. Why? Why me? Because they needed a key that heaven wouldn't see coming. A hybrid with enough celestial power to affect the gates, but enough humanity to slip past the wards. Your mother. His voice caught. She died during the process. The shard's integration was too violent. Her body couldn't handle it. Azrael felt her die, felt you surviving inside her, and he made a choice. Tears burned my eyes. I didn't wipe them away. What happened to him? He went berserk. Tore through the ritual chamber, killed 12 Grigori with his bare hands. Got you out, still in the womb, barely viable. He found a human hospital, used his power to keep you alive while doctors performed an emergency extraction. Then he spent his last moments ensuring you'd be hidden. False memories. Manipulated records, an entire fabricated identity. He sealed himself and the remaining Watchers in a collapsing pocket dimension to buy you time to grow up, to become strong enough to survive. Sariel met my eyes, and I saw genuine sorrow there. You're alive because he chose your life over his own. Over hers, over everything he'd ever believed in. The weight of it was crushing, suffocating. I'd spent my whole life thinking I was abandoned, unwanted, a mistake that nobody had cared enough to keep. Instead, I was the product of sacrifice so profound it had cost 2 lives and damned a guardian who'd served for centuries. I'm sorry, Sariel said. You deserved to know earlier, but we hoped you'd never need to. No, I managed. Thank you for telling me. Tobias turned from the front seat. Your father would be proud, you know. What you did back there, holding off a throne while barely trained, that's not just power. That's will. That's what he gave you. The SUV crested a hill, and suddenly we could see it. The plateau. It sat in the middle of absolute nowhere, surrounded by standing stones that predated recorded history. Megaliths that made Stonehenge look like a recent construction project. Each stone was easily 40 feet tall, covered in erosion and lichen, but underneath, I could see symbols, the same ones on my skin, on Sariel's, carved deep into rock that shouldn't have been able to hold such precise marks. The air itself seemed to shimmer around the plateau, heat mirage distortions, despite the cool temperature. Reality was bending around a point I couldn't quite focus on, like trying to look directly at a blind spot. As I watched, the distortion grew, taking on form. A doorway, massive and ornate, made of light and geometry that hurt to perceive. The gate. It was the most beautiful and terrifying thing I'd ever seen. The frame seemed to be constructed from crystallized starlight, and through it, I could see something. Not heaven, not yet. The gate wasn't fully open, but hints of it. Colors that didn't exist in normal spectrum. Sounds like music composed by mathematics itself. The smell of something burning and blooming simultaneously. It's manifesting early, Petra said, checking her equipment with practiced efficiency. Her hands moved over weapons, checking loads, testing edges. They're already here. She was right. Figures emerged from the rocks, from the shadows between the standing stones, from places that shouldn't have had enough space to hide anything. Grigori, dozens of them, maybe more. Some looked almost human. Others had stopped trying to maintain the disguise, their true forms bleeding through in wings of shadow, eyes that multiplied across their faces, limbs that bent in too many places. And in front, standing perfectly still like he'd been waiting for hours, stood a being that made the air around him crack with potential energy. Just looking at him hurt, like staring at an eclipse. Azazel. He looked almost human at first glance. If you ignored the eyes, black from edge to edge, no white, no iris, just darkness containing entire galaxies in their depths. Stars wheeled slowly in those impossible pupils, ancient light from dead suns. He wore simple clothing, jeans and a shirt that looked pulled from a thrift store, but power rolled off him in waves that made the ground beneath him steam. When he smiled, it was the saddest thing I'd ever seen, like watching someone remember a joke from a lifetime they could never return to. "Hello, little shard-bearer," he said, his voice like honey poured over broken glass. Each word resonated on multiple frequencies. I heard it with my ears, felt it in my chest, tasted it somehow. "Do you know why we're here?" We stepped out of the vehicle. Sariel positioned himself slightly ahead of me, but not blocking me entirely. Petra and Tobias flanked us, weapons ready but not raised. The math was simple and brutal. We were outnumbered 20-1, possibly more. "To invade heaven," I replied, surprised at how steady my voice sounded. The fear was still there, coiling in my gut, but alongside it was something else. Anger. Determination. "No." Azazel stepped closer, and Sariel tensed, but didn't intervene. "To go home. To finally, after 4,000 years of exile, go home." His voice cracked slightly on the last word, genuine emotion bleeding through. "Do you know what we did to deserve banishment? We loved. We loved humanity so much that we violated the prime directive, non-interference. We taught you writing, mathematics, metalworking, agriculture. We gave you the tools to build civilization because we believed you deserved better than scrabbling in the dirt." He spread his hands and I saw scars there, deep, old, wounds that had never properly healed even on an immortal body. For this crime, for loving you, we were cast down, imprisoned in the abyss for millennia. Do you know what the abyss is? It's not fire and brimstone. It's absence. Nothing but nothing, forever, with only your own thoughts for company. Some of us went mad. Some of us simply stopped. ceased to exist through sheer will because non-existence was preferable to that endless void. I looked at Sariel. Is he telling the truth? Sariel's jaw tightened. Parts of it. The Grigori did teach humanity forbidden knowledge, but they did it against explicit command, knowing the consequences. And they didn't do it purely from altruism. They wanted worship, wanted to be gods. We wanted to be appreciated. Azazel's voice rose, and the standing stones trembled in response. We wanted the same love from humanity that heaven demanded for itself. Is that so wrong? Is wanting connection, wanting purpose beyond serving as silent guardians, is that truly worthy of eternal damnation? He turned back to me, and I saw tears in those impossible eyes. Actual tears, glowing faintly. The shard you carry, it can unlock the gate. But more than that, it can reset the original seals, rewrite the boundary conditions, undo the punishment. We don't want to conquer heaven. We don't want revenge. We just want forgiveness. We want to go home. He took another step closer. But the cost is your life. The shard would need to discharge completely, burn through your entire essence to power the rewriting. You would die, cease to exist just as Elias did. But think about what you'd achieve. Ending a war that's lasted since before your species learned to speak. Reuniting families separated by divine decree for millennia. You'd be a hero, Dominic, a true savior. Doesn't that mean something? For a moment, just one terrible, tempting moment. I considered it. A meaningful death versus a life as a weapon, as an abomination that heaven itself wanted erased. Elias's voice echoed in my mind, stay human. But was dying to save others the most human thing I could do? Or was it just another form of being used? I remembered Elias fading into nothing. Tobias's empty eyes, haunted by centuries of loss. Petra's resigned determination, her acceptance that death was always one fight away. My father, choosing my life over everything he'd believed in. And if I refuse? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Azazel's smile disappeared. The temperature dropped 20 degrees in an instant. Ice crystals formed on the standing stones. Then we take it by force. And everyone here dies badly, slowly. I'll make sure of it. The tears were still in his eyes, but now they looked like frozen stars. I've waited 4,000 years for this. I'm not waiting anymore. The Grigori began advancing, a wave of shadow and starlight moving across the plateau. Their footsteps made no sound, but I felt each one through the ground, through my bones. Sariel stepped forward, and his true form began to show through the human veneer, wings unfolding from his back, 6 of them, each one made of light that burned to look at directly. The marks on his body blazed like brands, and the air around him ignited with power. You'll have to go through me first, he said, his voice layered with harmonics that shook the earth. I was hoping you'd say that, Azazel replied, and there was genuine regret in his voice. You were always one of the good ones, Sariel, but you're on the wrong side of history. They clashed, and reality buckled. The fight between Archangel and Ancient Watcher wasn't physical in any normal sense. It was conceptual, 2 forces of will trying to unmake each other. The ground cracked beneath them, not from impact, but from the sheer weight of their existence pressing down on space itself. Light and darkness intertwined, each trying to consume the other. I could hear singing, celestial harmonics that made my ears bleed but sounded impossibly beautiful. Petra and Tobias engaged the other Grigori, their weapons blazing. I saw Tobias move with grace that belied his age, each strike precise and economical. He took down 3 Grigori in as many seconds, his blade, a sword that hummed with the same frequency as my marks, cutting through their defenses like they were made of paper. But there were too many. For every one they killed, 2 more pressed forward. A Grigori with wings of crystallized shadow lunged at Tobias from his blind side. He spun, too slow, and I saw the blade, made of something that looked like frozen starlight, punch through his chest from behind. The tip emerged just below his collarbone, dripping with blood that glowed faintly. "No!" Petra's scream cut through the chaos. Tobias looked down at the blade, then at us, and his expression was almost peaceful. "It's fine," he said, blood bubbling from his lips. "It's finally fine." He grabbed his killer with both hands, pulling the Grigori closer even as the blade twisted inside him. His body began to glow, brighter and brighter, heat radiating from him in waves that made the air shimmer. "Tobias, don't—" Petra started, but it was too late. He detonated, not an explosion of fire or force, but of pure energy, celestial power releasing all at once in a blast that consumed him and the Grigori completely. When the light faded, there was nothing left of either of them, just scorched earth and the lingering smell of ozone. Petra screamed his name again, her composure finally shattering completely. The distraction cost her. A Grigori with too many eyes slashed at her with claws made of shadow, and she went down hard. Blood spread across the stone beneath her, too much blood, pooling in cracks that glowed faintly with residual power. And then it was just me and the gate. Azazel broke away from Sariel long enough to grab me, his hand closing around my throat. The shard reacted violently, burning him, but he held on. "Open it," he hissed, "or watch them all die." I looked at Sariel, who was struggling to his feet, his form flickering between human and celestial. At Petra, trying to stop the bleeding. At the gate, pulsing with light that called to something deep in my soul. And I made my choice. I grabbed Azazel's wrist and pulled him close. "You want the shard? Take it." I opened myself completely, let the power flow out, but not into the gate, into him. The shard wasn't just a key. It was a weapon, forged in the moment of my creation from power that predated angels. It recognized Azazel for what he was, a being who'd violated the natural order, who'd mixed what should have stayed separate. He screamed as the energy poured into him, burning not his body, but his essence. The other Grigori felt it too, connected to him through their shared nature. They began to burn from within, their forms destabilizing. "No," Azazel gasped. "This isn't— You're not— I'm not a key," I said, feeling my own life draining away as the shard discharged. "I'm a lock, and you just tried to pick me." The light grew blinding. I felt myself coming apart, my consciousness fragmenting. But before I disappeared completely, Sariel was there, his hands on my chest, his own power flowing into me. "Not today," he said through gritted teeth. "You don't get to die heroically. Not yet." The shard's energy reversed, flowing back into me. But changed, tempered, controlled. Azazel stumbled back, his form flickering. The other Grigori were fleeing, their assault broken. "This isn't over," Azazel said, his voice weaker. "The war continues." "Let it," I replied, "but not today, and not through me." He vanished, and with him the remaining attackers. The gate began to close, its time passed, but before it sealed completely, something came through, a sensation more than a thing, a presence that spoke without words. "Well done, little guardian. You have earned your right to choose." The presence touched my mind, and I understood. The shard wasn't a curse or a weapon. It was a test, and I'd passed by refusing both martyrdom and monstrosity. When the light faded, the plateau was quiet. Petra was breathing, her wounds already closing, accelerated healing, another gift of the marks. Sariel stood beside me, exhausted but alive. "What now?" I asked. "Now we heal, we rebuild, and we prepare for the next convergence." He looked at me with something like respect. "You're one of us now. A guardian, not because you have to be, because you chose to be." I looked at my hands. The marks were still there, glowing faintly. But they felt different now, mine, rather than something imposed on me. "Elias and Tobias will be remembered," Petra said, standing on shaky legs. "We'll add their names to the memorial, and we'll make sure their sacrifice mattered. We left the plateau as dawn truly broke, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. I didn't know what came next. More battles, more losses, more impossible choices. But I knew one thing with certainty. I wasn't Dominic Vale, the inventory manager, anymore. I wasn't just a key or a weapon or a mistake. I was a gatekeeper, and I would stand guard for as long as I was needed. The war was far from over. But I'd learned something Azazel never understood. The strongest lock isn't the one that can't be opened. It's the one that chooses what it protects. And I'd made my choice.